Welcome to another episode of the Fighting Men of Rhodesia Talk. Today I welcome on board Andrew Krajewski from Indep. Looking at his little synopsis, it's going to be a riotous event, more along the lines of humour, which I think is great. And I was introduced to Andrew via Russell Fulton on Facebook, and this is what Russell says of Andrew. This is going to be a must interview, as the man is super intelligent and funnier than any person I've ever known. So I hope that hasn't put you on the spot, Andy. But I welcome you from a cold England. I can't believe 3 weeks ago it was 40 degrees here, and now I've got a jersey on and I'm all trussed up, and hands are freezing. It reminds me of a time when I was at Osby's in '76. It was so cold that in this fake ambush we were doing, the instructor people walked through the front. We were so cold as cadets that we couldn't actually fire at the enemy patrol walking through the ambush position because our fingers wouldn't work. And the thanks I got for that, for not engaging the ambush, was a thunder flash thrown at me, which landed 1.5 meters from the flash hider on my MAG. And all I could do is put my head on the ground and sigh and pray to the Lord. I don't think my head's ever been right since that bang went off. But well, I'm taking up too much time. Andy, just give us a rough overview of who you are and where you came from, where you were born, etc. And then please just carry on with your chat.
Tony, thanks very much indeed. And I really appreciate to me, it's an honor and a real privilege. I did a double take at this fighting man bit because, I don't know, we went where we were sent and we did what we were told. But I don't actually ever remember anybody telling me I'd be spending probably 98% of my time running away from the big five. So that was probably in the small print. But basically, so my name's Andrew Krajewski. I'm brother to a late departed and lamented sister who had a hell of a sense of humor, born of Polish parents, mom and dad, are both gone now, unfortunately, real characters, all three of them. So, I'm born in Zambia, which is in northern Rhodesia. Lived there until I was about 10 or so, moved down to go to school in what's now Zimbabwe. Spent about 10 years there, which bracketed Whitestone, which was a preparatory school in Bulawayo. That was the high point of my education. Then a slither along to Kwekwe Junior School, then to Kwekwe High in the Midlands, and then on to do GCE M and A levels at Thornhill, which is in Gweru. And we always, we did cross country runs through Gweru at that stage. And I remember looking up at that hill above the School of Infantry and thinking, interesting, high ground. I had no idea that within a couple of years I would be running up there up to 4 times a day in the company of a whole bunch of other fellows, and none of us really wanted to be there. So it's one of those things. So sort of basically grew up raised in Africa, in my bones, in my genes, in my DNA. But one of the things which I wanted to talk about was I suppose as part of the basic biography is. My upbringing was I think quite interesting. My dad always, his safe place after being through absolute hell in World War II, his safe place that he most wanted to be was in the bush, as he called it. And I think the high point of his experiences would have been a foot safari in November 1962 to the Rwangwa Valley with another great character who was my late godfather, who was a professional hunter, and just starting out on that long road at that stage. And I think that Dad and his bosom friend, Mervyn, were Angus's 2 first clients. I don't know how long it took my mother to forgive them for the sort of foolhardy act as Dad came back, half blind, bitten to shreds, and smelling like he'd been kippered over wood smoke for about 6 months or so. So between my sort of like the family association and the infamous black and white TV of the day that showed David Attenborough putting around Africa, going through flooded rivers in a Land Rover Series 1, I think, it sort of, I suppose it prepared the ground for what came later. And what came later was the infamous letter pitched at the call-up papers. You will present yourself on, and it's, so it was a February intake. It was intake 161, which was it was end of February, March 1978. So off to Llewellyn Barracks for not quite a week. There was this initial officer selection thing, which I got through, which was a little bit of a mystery. And then, presented myself with a whole bunch of other hopefuls at what's called M26, which is 161 Alpha Squad, at the School of Infantry. And it was a blast. It was there literally until end of July 1978, which is quite a time, and the steepest of learning curves. It was a privilege to be in that environment, I always think, and I think I've taken a heck of a lot, from that. Anyway, so after that, I passed out. I finished the course and was elected to be elevated to the rank of full corporal, which I think is it's a sort of a very backhanded compliment. But I tell you what, I'll take any rank at all from that. As I said, it was an amazing experience. And then I was actually shipped off of all places, to Indep at Kariba. And there was a lot of interest in this in our family because, with Dad's background in the bush and that, and my own sort of upbringing in that, I thought, gee, well, Kariba. I thought, well, now what is Kariba? Well, Indep is based up at the Heights, or was based up at the Heights at Kariba, but our operational area was literally from the eastern basin of that wonderful lake right the way through, and then it's literally from the length of that middle Zambezi River, so it's from the wall at Kariba right the way down to, I suppose, the confluence of the Cautionary River, which is some ways east. It's about, I think, actually got a pair of dividers once and walked this out on all my 1 in 50,000 maps, and it's about, give or take, 200 kilometers. So, 200 kilometers when you're floating is one thing. When you're dragging a 45 or 50 pound, 40 or 45 or 50 kg Bergen, plus chest webbing, plus, it becomes something else. And add to that the variable exposure to some quite formidable creatures along the way. So it was fun. It was great fun. We had basically 3 commanding officers in the time that I was there. If I can name them, there was a Major Burford, who was the first guy there. He, I think, he went off to I think, ComOps. A guy called Dion Creel took over. And then finally, our last year was a guy called Martin Wake, who was quite a character. And they brought their own sort of style of management there, which was interesting. I have vague memories of Kariba itself. We spent very little time up at the Heights or anywhere sort of civilized. It was one of these things, a couple of days, 3 days, retraining basically, and then off into the Shatin, the Bundu, the bush, which was amazing. And it was there where I think one of the most sort of used emotions would have been just the raw adrenaline of trying to get out of the way of some quite intractable creatures. But also, the mood was amazing. I served with some of the most amazing characters, and so these were elements of, I think, 2 RAR, and so these Rhodesian African Rifle fellows, all regular soldiers, and quite some unforgettable people, quite some unforgettable times. So in this particular thing, there's all sorts of debts of gratitude, which I have to a number of people. I suppose to the guys in my call sign and those around us for keeping me essentially above the ground instead of underneath it. There were some amazing techniques and some wonderful military sort of strategy that was imparted by, I suppose, osmosis, and usually without any verbalization, because when you walk into a patch of thick bush and the bush starts shaking and there are these visceral snorting sounds that come from the middle of it, I don't think anybody waits to be told it's a rhino. So if I were you, I'd run in that direction. You just sort of take over, which is what we did. So I'm not sure if we hold any records in the sort of records that I suppose that some of the attributes which I brought to that would have been, I hope, a keen sense of observation. I'd read a whole bunch of books on other military service beforehand, and I had the benefit of my father's experiences in Poland, and then in Russia, and then North Africa, and then finally in the RAF to sort of go on. And I think if you wanted to make sense of most of the sort of military experiences, it probably helped to read my Adolf Hitler, My Partner's Downfall by Spike Milligan. And I think that sort of, and then followed up by a number of classics. But his first 2 books, that was Adolf Hitler, My Partner's Downfall, and Rommel Gunner Who, left absolutely indelible marks. I think they spent a hell of a long time laughing at some of the innate absurdities that you have in military as a sort of bureaucracy. Yeah. It's unwise to laugh out loud, in those situations, because you'll find yourself running all over the place for various reasons. Some of them good, some of them forgettable. But it's great fun. And again, is one of the things that I recall most about our African servicemen was the fact that they laughed. They always seemed to find something something worth laughing about in just about every situation. And there were some wonderful turns of phrase, some amazing facial expressions, and just as I said, a whole lot of these incredible military skills which actually just passed between us. So I think I owe those guys a lot on that. They were formative years to a large extent. I was very, very proud, and I felt a sense of honor at the time, and a sense of privilege, being involved with guys who weren't all that much older than I was. I went in when I was 19 years old, and I knew zipper. I would have been about the naivest, wettest behind the ear fellow that you would ever met. And slowly but surely, that sort of stuff got walked out of me, it got stamped out of me, it got kicked out of me, it got bitten out of me. We became magnets for crocodiles. We whispered with hyenas. We violently evaded every member of the Big Five that you could nominate. And I have my own short list of what should constitute the Big Five. And I noticed with some interest that things like hyenas and crocodiles aren't on it. But being along that sort of stretch of the Zambezi River, at that stage, there was no one but us on the south side of the bank, and obviously the north side of the bank, the Zambian sort of territory, that was settled. But essentially, it was just us and the tsetse flies and the mosquitoes and the biting ants and the hornets and the puff adders, the rhinos, the buffaloes, and the baboons. So all sorts of things. Really, really good times. So the strangest thing is I think a lot of these things sit latent for a while, and a couple of the experiences sort of tend to manifest sooner than others. But there seems to be about a 30 to 35 year delay period, after which people start picking up, pens and scrabbling furiously. I don't know if it would be, for instance, that very bright blow just before a bulb goes out. But I feel that's certainly been the case in my experience. And it's just having been primed to look at all the natural beauty around me by my father's experiences, because, geez, it was a nightly ritual all the way through high school when I was in Quaker. Every night, after supper, we'd go sit outside on the veranda, look at the stars, and Dad would tell me these amazing sights and sounds and experiences that he'd experienced in just 1 month in the Luangwa Valley in November 1962. And let me tell you, in that part of the world, November is not a good time to go on a foot safari. It is damn hot. It is extraordinarily dry. So, we had all. I just grew up primed with all that, and I think one of the greatest debts of gratitude that I probably would owe my father and my late godfather, as I said, who was a professional hunter, was just that. I think the realization that what I was seeing had to be sort of encapsulated some way, because it was just too precious and too unique and too remarkable to be forgotten. And once, I struggled with that for years and years and years. And I suppose the sort of eureka moment was going on because we lived about an hour north of Perth in Western Australia, in a tiny little place called Ginger. And it was just one of these things that popped up on, there was a notice put up in their tiny library, just saying, well, there was a creative writing course being held by a gentleman in Perth who was at that stage a lecturer in English literature at the University of Edith Cowan University, in Perth. And Alan, this fellow, was absolutely amazing. I think about, for that course, it was 2 consecutive Wednesday mornings. So climbed into the car, drove down to Whitford's, which is about an hour's drive away in Perth from Ginger, and then sat in with my mouth absolutely open, just listening to this incredible sense of this gentleman spoke. So if there's anyone who either gets credit or perhaps blame, depending on the quality of writing or lack thereof, I would have to point a finger squarely at Alan and saying he was the master locksmith. He, for good or ill, I don't know yet, he gave me that key and I've locked all those sorts of memories. And it's ridiculous now. I go to sleep. What's next to my bed are my reading glasses and notebooks and filling pencils. They have to be a certain color, a sort of reddy orange style thing. It's amazing how ACDC, OCDC, whatever it is, you can actually get how obsessive you can actually get by things like that. Because one thing, Alan's first thing that he said is make friends with pieces of paper, write everything down, And essentially, memory is no respecter of time of day. So you are never safe from a marauding idea. You're never safe from a memory that just comes through. And he said that, with good stories will actually choose you as the conduit, and you're acting as a lightning rod, and you're going from this great big pool of energy. And the energy can be extremely traumatic. It can be the most beautiful things. It's all sorts of things that set up this sort of voltage between, the ether and this piece of paper in front of you. And you just happen to be the lightning rod. And if you're a good conductor on that sort of thing, again, for good or ill, that story will write itself through you. And I honestly believe that, which I'm not sure if I write that down and I read it back to myself, I kind of worry, and I'm thinking like, what? But it's kept me entertained. I've had quite a long convalescence about 5 or 6 years ago. I was traveling a fair amount overseas in my little citrus consultancy business that I do. And I was struck down by a couple of dreaded lurgies in rapid succession. So having my foot up as such, and just having been through more surgery than I cared to sort of think about, it gives you a different perspective. And the weirdest thing is that it seemed to add to the memory. The other thing was actually sitting on my backside with not much else to do except convalesce. Is a very, very good time to pick up a whole ream of paper or two and start scribbling. That was a great fun style thing. So again, I have a debt of gratitude that I am unable to repay for Alan for actually, I suppose, handing me the tool by which I could actually get some amazing, in my opinion, some amazing experiences. Different people, different places, different situations, and unique, all the same. And just to actually get that from these sort of cobwebby depths in between my ears to maybe a place where other people might share them. They might, some people, to me, if one person reads anything I've written and says, gee, that's brought back like an image of a flame lily or an elephant or a fish eagle or something, or a braai or something, a wood fire. That is splendid. So I mean, Alan said that ball rolling, and then I went straight from there into a most fortuitous meeting with this amazing fellow, Russell Fulton. Russell Fulton is an amazing. I mean, I don't know. Weirdest thing is through this Chibaya Moyo 1 and then Chibaya Moyo 2, these two books that these guys contributed to so magnificently, and all the other work that they put in, and I'm talking about, the two guys would be Russell and Andrew Telfer. I mean, that is an amazing job of work. And it's the weirdest thing is I come from a 2-child family, my sister and myself. But all of a sudden I found I had 2 people about whom I expected that sort of depth of feeling and that kind of understanding to come with people who are actually related by blood and not by circumstance. And that to me has been the most amazing experience. All these years later, and I still do have a number of my army pals from those days. But to actually make a whole bunch of acquaintances along the way, and these two latterly, because these are 2 very, very special people. And I owe them both more thanks than I could ever actually express. They gave me literally carte blanche to write any fevered, despaired rubbish that I could put down on paper. And I don't think they ever changed anything, which is remarkable. Because, to be given that kind of leeway with, and in that particular context, and, while we're sort of, blowing people's praise and that kind of thing, is of all the titles to call 2 books of that thing, Chibaya Moyo is absolutely, it is inspired. And I'm in this situation of having a whole bunch of little pieces, I suppose. I call them little sketches. They're character sketches. There would be essays of people, places, experiences. I've tried to dwell more on the humorous aspect because, the actual, like the major, the heavy combat and that kind of thing, that's been written about by some people who actually deserve to tell that story, and they are infinitely better placed than I am to give an opinion. I was just a fellow who I was by inclination, a life scientist. I was put in an area, literally a garden, I suppose like the Garden of Eden, but with an FN rifle in my hand. And I'd like to think that we didn't actually abuse the privilege. but if you look at all that, all that sort of experience, that pool of sort of knowledge and that kind of thing, what I think I'd most like, if it is anything that I'd be able to leave behind, apart from a whole bunch of random words on too many pages, it would be the fact that these were incredible times and quite exceptional people. What I loved about the guys with whom I served is very human. So some vices, but many virtues. And the vices absolutely hilarious. I was just unable to resist basically not writing about several of these. And until the end of my days, I hope I can remember some of the facial expressions on some of the taxi drivers' faces as our 3 RLs pulled into it was all at that stage, Salisbury Central train station, with a whole bunch of gentlemen who had been in the bush for 7 weeks and were starting to show signs of pixelating and delaminating as we were going. It was one of the most remarkable experiences. I don't know who's listening to this, but I've seen devices put to strange uses. But you could have tracked us, I suppose, from Sonoya by a trail of blown up contraceptives that came in this uninterrupted flow off the back of some of these vehicles, and the comments, the humor, it's by the time I got, after 3 hours on the back of an RL like that, I literally could not breathe without pain. I'd laughed so much, and it was amazing because that's a heck of a thing. But you share a different kind of conversation with a fellow that you've just met, as opposed to a fellow that you spent 8 hours up at the top of the tree with a couple of buffaloes sort of snorting around at the bottom. And it's surreal. A lot of it is absolutely surreal now. But I don't know. I suppose everybody, I suppose everybody wants to sort of replay certain parts of their lives. But that's one chapter that, if it was in my power to go back and relive that, I'm not sure if I'd change anything at all. Which I think is quite remarkable. So just on this particular thing, there's a whole bunch of things which I found just so amazing about this. Being in military service, I really believe that some kind of military service does people a power of good. And I'm talking about the type of service that we had, where everybody had a place and there was a place for everybody. Things were pretty cut and dried, and people looked after you at all sorts of levels. And it's absolutely amazing. One of the just the sort of, I suppose, the subtlety and the courtesy with which I suppose pretty rough but very, very wise soldiers would just introduce themselves into a conversation, but with such tact. And this, if I had any virtues, I suppose it would be from climbing. I was able to climb trees fully equipped with bergens and all that sort of thing, chest webbing, service rifle, and a whole bundle, like one of those Mapani squirrels. And that's one of those high performance additives, this thing called adrenaline, because there's nothing like walking through probably nostril high grass and then having an entire half acre of this uprooted stuff apparently at your feet. And then just to see this gleam of these sort of fevered eyes in front of you, and this to be covered with foam from a snort from a pair of sort of 12 gauge style nostrils, and that'll send you up any tree. It doesn't matter if there's thorns on it or in it. It's of no import, because getting up a tree is interesting. Getting down is the trick. So we elevated tree climbing to. I mean, it's not that it's not really pick and choose, because I'm sorry, but where you happen to be when something is trying to eat you is that's the tree that you sort of kind of go up. And we even sort of worked out, wasn't quite a hierarchy, because it was first come, first served. This was very democratic. If 4 people converged on a single tree, it's just people would swarm up this, and they would use each other as levers. They would stand on people's head to get up to the highest branches and that. But it's just one of these really surreal things. Is 2 call signs once. My call sign 22 Bravo, and then my great friend Rob Delaney, who still lives in South Africa. Rob's call sign was 22 Delta, and I'm absolutely certain that all of 22 Delta wound up one tree and all of 22 Bravo up another, and we struck up this conversation across the sort of the ether, which is fun. So I don't know, tree climbing is one thing. I had the ability to get lost. Was a frenzied fisherman. a frenzied bird watcher, frenzied all sorts of things. But as I said, literally, can you imagine having that experience as a 19 and 20-year-old of being handed literally the keys to the Garden of Eden and sort of out you go and just sort of have a swan around. We were very, very lucky. Tactically or strategically, that area was a major it was a transit area for a lot of Zipper folks who come through from Zambia. And there were large groups of folks that would actually cross that river, then bombshell, and then shoot off into at that stage, various parts of Rhodesia and that. And sort of anxious moments and that, but always aware of one thing is that river it's deep, it's seriously wide, it's full of crocodiles, and I don't know how many hippos there would be. And those two creatures, hippos and crocodiles, have always had a special place in my consciousness. So it was again that was fun. And the weirdest things also is having had this, I suppose, as background with my father, who was a very, very keen shotist himself, and my ex-professional hunter godfather, Angus, who hunted in Zambia and then came down to at that stage sort of southeastern lowveld of Rhodesia at that stage. Having had that background, I have always been fascinated by firearms. And the weirdest thing is, there's responsible firearm ownership and there's all sorts of things, but I found the military to be amazing. The one time where people would literally leave you alone and people would lower their voice and they would calm you down. So you'd be driven pillar to post on a parade square. You would have your mother insulted. You would be called a range of terms, some of which, by the way, I'm still trying to decipher. There's a couple of things that we were called that appear in no. They're certainly not in the Oxford English Dictionary, and I found no reference to them anywhere else.
Lower than shotted.
No, it's just too. I don't know. It's the strangest thing, and I'm going skipping back to this sort of training thing. But I have a very vivid. It's more than a snippet because this thing was yelled into my ear from about 5 centimeters away. I think I did something like I dropped a bayonet, like doing a bayonet drill or something. And this fellow, who was actually a visiting fellow, he wasn't actually our course instructor, but I think our course instructor lost his voice or something like this, so this guy was deputizing. And our course instructor was the sergeant, the guy who actually took over from him was a WO2. And this fellow bellowed something along the rates of, "You bloody Nimarenji, you." And I've looked at that word Nimarenji, and it's a beauty. And I use it sort of like once a week here, which mystifies fellow Antipodeans and that. And I haven't the foggiest idea what it means. But it sounds plausibly, like marginally insulting. So it's just this, there's this whole vocab that you learn, and there are all these skills and that. And it's left me with a whole bunch of I suppose, very, very very more sort of positive experiences than negative ones, which I've done a few things. I had essentially 15 months or so to learn either Shona or Indep, and I wound up teaching two of the guys in my course time. They did correspondence courses in English. So we used to sit down on a Saturday morning and write these guys' essays. It was these very racy, not quite what I did in last holiday, but well, anyway. So that was really interesting to see where those guys were coming from and what these guys had written and just to sort of like help them a bit. But I really do wish I'd paid them just the basic courtesy of learning more than one or two words of either language or both languages. Yeah, I suppose things get, clearer. Some things get clearer as you get older, but there are so many memories of incredible beauty. There's still several things that happened that really make me laugh. And I don't know how appropriate some of these are. I mean, we're talking about fellows in the middle of the African bush.
No, go for it.
I reckon one of the all-time, I suppose, brightest images I have is of four fellows who are taking turns to actually float down a 350-meter long stretch of the river. Now, this is downstream from Kariba Gorge, and it's where the river actually flattens and broadens a bit, which is it's quite an amazing thing, and it's quite unique because you're able to literally walk up the bank 350 meters upstream, hand your rifle to a fellow who is clad in just a pair of khakis and a hat, and that's it. And you give your rifle to that fellow, you then wearing not even a pair of khakis and a hat, then bob down in the nude, full Monty, and God knows what the Zambian army or Zipper made of this, but all the way down the 350 meters and a fellow after you, and then you sort of climb up. So we had this sort of this rotating road of people, and after about 7 or 8 turns of this, but you're in this beautiful crystal clear water, which is rushing along, and you're floating, literally floating on your back, not a care in the world. There's fish eagles around the place. But having read this horrible Spike Milligan book about some of their experiences in the Mediterranean Sea, well, I think it was one of Queen Victoria, according to Milligan, said that, like thrashing around in salt water or cold water or something is very healthful. But I don't know about the healthful thing, is that there was, to put too sort of fine a point on this, but, a couple of these fellows used to float on their backs, quite sort of ostentatiously displaying what in submariners' terms would be a conning tower and periscope. Then to have sharp-eyed fellows pick up pebbles, float by at that, and then in this dreadful German, ersatz German accent, shout, this Achtung, feiern Sie das torpedo, and then, so direct hit would usually be registered by a howl, and then whoever it was sinking. So that stuff never got old. It's very juvenile. I don't know what a psychologist would make of it, but you know what? Yeah, like where's one when you need one? So I mean that was hilarious in my opinion. It always got a hell of a laugh. And so also some of the other things would be the practical jokes were of I don't know. Maybe it's just where these things took place, but. We had one fellow in the call sign. This is 4 of us. So there's myself, my 2 IC, and then these 2 amazing gentlemen. And Dube, Private Dube was an amazing character. He was a guy who was doing this English correspondence course and that. But Dube was one of these sort of closet smokers. And at night time, you'd see the first thing you'd smell is just. You might just see a little flare of a match, but this is something that's being lit under a nylon army sleeping bag. So you might just see the flare of light, but then you get that sort of sulfurous swirl of a match being struck. And then, he'd light up this usually a Madison or whatever it was, and then start sort of clandestinely puffing on this. And we just couldn't dissuade him because he's like a chain smoker. And by 8 o'clock at night, he said, like one more cigarillo, and I tell you what, 8 o'clock at night in that place, dark happens so rapidly. You see this spectacular sunset, it plummets, and 15 minutes later, you can't see your hand in front of your face. So we thought, okay, so what we did was we improvised this amazing, I improvised this amazing contrivance, which was, I thought it would be like a sort of a 2-stage pyrotechnic. And it was modeled around 2 different, I suppose, angry compounds. One would be that I actually wound up with a couple of old Mark 7 303 rounds from basically a 303 Browning machine gun, which I borrowed a couple of rounds of this from one of the police reservists at Fort F, FAF 2, which was Kariba. So got those coordinate sticks, and I don't really want to go into how to make this because I might want to use it again. But essentially, what it was is we spiked 3 of his cigarettes. He did around that sort of thing, but we spiked 3 of his cigarettes with call it a small but powerful infernal machine, and we'd stuck them back and just waited. And the weirdest thing was, it was a 20-piece pack. There were 3 of those. He'd smoked 2 or 3. So you'd think that one of the things that, within a day or two, we had to wait about 4 days until he actually got one of these particular ones. But my God, it was worth it. So, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it didn't happen at night. It was one of the ones that he lit up during the day. And I sort of because we took to observing the guy very, very narrowly, and nothing for like 5 days. I'm thinking, God, what's happened? But then when it did go off, it was amazing because the first thing was he caught this. Well, anyway, it ignited after a very loud and lusty puff on this thing, what actually happened is part of this infernal machine was a whole bunch of match heads that had been scraped into heat. So those turned to sort of liquid sulfur and were blasted by this sort of little combusting column of cordite sticks and actually shot this molten sulfur down the back of the guy's throat. And then there was another little device which actually burnt for us. And so the first thing is the puff, the eyes like watering, this horrible racking, like tubercular cough. And then holding this thing like this, and it burnt, the cordite burnt in 3 sort of lines until it actually hit the booster charge, and then it just went, and it scattered this, and this was sort of, this was just normal smokeless powder, which then shot these little shards of this stuff off, which actually went all over his clothing and on his army sleeping bag and into the sort of grass around him. There's a whole sequence of spark fires that sprang up outside this chain smoking thing, and it was unflipping believable. He drank, he gargled. It was pathetic. Of course, Buenya, who was his bosom friend, thought this was the most hilarious thing. And this is the amazing thing: is if anybody gets injured to the point of not being disabled or dismembered or something, the laughter was the best medicine. So I see people like hanging on the bars at the sick bay at Kariba and laughing at people who have had burns from. One guy, he changed a gas cylinder. There was still some gas in there. So, and he lit up a cigarette. It just went woof. So this guy's got, first degree burns and that, which means that they smeared him in this white, white pink, it's a sort of pink chamomile solution. And all of his friends hung on the outside of the building on the burglar guards and laughed and laughed and laughed. He was in the sick bay for 2 days. And after about a day and a half, as I went to see him, I said, "How do you get these stuff? Please give me it." Look at this. It's got these guys hanging on those things from after breakfast until wherever. Because that just happened to be during one of our retraining sessions. And again, the other thing is, I'm not sure if Kariba, the actual base itself of Platoon, it would ever have recovered. But these fellows coming back from R&R was. Okay, they said it was about half a day to get back. Night in Kariba, next day retraining, day after that retraining, day after that. Anyway, after literally on day 2 is we'd usually be summoned by the long-suffering troop medics and have to submit to this dreadful indignity of basically dropping one's trousers to check on the state of one's appendages, as it were, because as I said, a couple of these fellows wound up with communicable, notifiable social diseases type thing. And it got so bad that after the one R&R, there was 1 out of 27 fellows who was not infested, and the rest of these fellows were. And our commanding officer came hurtling by and just saw this whole column of troops standing there, most of whom were rearranging their trousers and that, because they'd been in trouser mode for the previous sort of 2 weeks on R&R. And the guy stopped and said, "Okay, what's going on here?" He said, "Well," so he explained. The guy hit the roof. He said, sorry. I'm sending 6 people out of a platoon to cover this area. So, sorry, stick leaders, you're all going. You will draw X amount. The medics work out how many syringes, how many needles, how many what's the names. And I tell you what, it is there's an art to giving an intramuscular injection with something stinging like benzyl penicillin. And after a while, we just didn't have the art. But what these guys took to doing was then to jabbing each other. It was absolutely hilarious, because again on this sort of wounded, this wounded indignation on the faces of these fellows. It's like what am I supposed to do? And it was the unfairest thing on the planet that these fellows were not allowed to languish in base. And then to go, at night to some of the local sort of, houses of ill repute, and then continue the sort of legacy, as it were. But these guys said, "No, that's it, retraining, out you go." So 42 degrees Celsius, all those tsetse flies, barrages, squadrons of mosquitoes at night, and basically, I suppose, that much in a syringe of about 7.5 mils of stinging benzyl penicillin. And they did not like that at all. The poor fellows sweated bullets. So there's just these funny little things that happened. That just the absolute fascination of these guys. And another memorable thing is I remember watching one of the other corporals, who's a guy, one of the regular RAR guys who had his own call sign, who's slightly older than the rest of us. But this guy was, I suppose, possibly one of the most amazing characters that I'd actually met during that time, and I met a hell of a lot of them. I remember us watching a spider in its web. And we think, okay, everybody knows that there's a spider, there's a web, and what happens is these creatures sort of blunder along and they stick to the web and the spider grabs them type thing. But this guy watched the spider long and hard for about an hour or something, and he looked at me, across to me, and said, you know what I think they're doing? You know, like we put these Sputniks, you know, with the A76 radio, we put these antennae up, and that's so we can actually get better reception, that kind of thing. And he asked me then, and this would have been 1978 or something. I said, don't you think that these spiders maybe not be doing this web for the same reason? Well, I'll tell you what, it's 2022. Hey, what a memory I have. You know? And there's a paper on my desk just over there about some guys who've just been doing work. There's a research group who have worked out that golden orb weaver spiders use their web as like an antennal array. So it's actually like an externalization of their ear that boosts their auditory capacity, their ability to hear based on the semantic structure. So that's what I loved about being in life sciences, and that is now, having got to the end of a strange military career, I'm writing things like Nobel's bait about dynamite and fish, rooted about me nearly dying after eating this bloody Prussic glucoside style, this poisonous root thing. Branch managers I've known, Yamazans of the night, scaly characters, the crocodile magnets, the hyena whisperers, and all this stuff is because we when Julie and I, my beloved, and I came out from South Africa to Australia, we brought all of our African textbooks. So there's books on, you name it. There's caterpillars, there's orchids, there's mammals, there's fish, there's the bundle. And one of the nicest things now, with all the information that we have, is to think back to an occasion where we might have been 30 feet away from a mapani tree that got blitzed by a lightning bolt. And I've written a piece of that called Ohm's Law. And so actually, because at that stage, is thinking, geez, hey, that's loud, and my goodness, that's bright. But how many volts and how many amps? So on that, I mean, there's some amazing information that you can actually get out. And I get it. I don't know. It's just something about me is I really, really enjoy, having a question that I'm thinking, okay, so lightning, like how does lightning work, and what actually happens, and how many volts and how many amps in it, because it's frightening stuff. And anyway, so and at last, I'm using these books that we've dragged all the way, literally halfway around the globe. So I mean, that's a lot of fun. As I try and do as much research as I can on all of these pieces. The weirdest thing was, roles reversed early on for me. I used to sit there with a mug of tea, just saying to Dad, "Geez, Dad, tell me about that rhino that you and Uncle Angus saw, under that thing." Oh, yes, well, that rhino, and off it would be. And within about, all too short, just literally not even 10 years later, I'm sitting there with the same person. I'm 10 years older. He's 10 years older. I've just got back from 7 weeks in this amazing place. And he'd say to me, "See any buffalo?" "Oh, geez, Dad, we saw probably like a herd of maybe 350 buffalo that came around this one hill, and just two. And it was like, where did you go and what did you see?" And it changed. It had changed because in olden time it was me asking my dad, and basically when I got to go to this area, and he spent a month in what he would consider paradise. I spent 16, 17 months, but yet in places like that, and stuff that we saw, it's just the most amazing thing. Just these little shards that I have in memory is just being a bird watcher is, I think, more and more of these things. But there's a place just probably 3 kilometers from the confluence of the Chirori River with the Zambezi. That's like way down. Go up to Chirundu and then just float downstream. And there's some amazing lodges and luxury lodges and bits and pieces that do some amazing tiger fishing, all catch and release, which is astounding. But there's a pool there called Natungu Pool. The first time time that I saw in Natugu Pool, it had water in it, had water lilies, it had reeds, the bundle, and it had probably, I don't know, there were 2,000 lovebirds, these little rosy cheat, I think, or lilians. I can't actually recall which lovebirds they were, but these beautiful little creatures just buzzing around. But by the thousand of them, just like swirling around this chip of blue water with these little water lilies in the bundle. And that was incredible. We got rained on with this intertropical convergence zone. The sun popped out, and we're walking through the bush. Just everything, just this incredible sort of grey sky, this amazing rainbow. Just heard this rumble of elephants, stopped, and then out of this re-entrant in front of us appeared the top, and it got higher and higher and higher and higher. And it was like looming above us. And there were 3 elephants that had come up this little cutting. And they were dark greyish, like the colour of oxidized lead, that sort of leaden grey, purplish colour. The whitish yellow of the ivory, and just glistening and gleaming. But just with that sky behind them, amazing tusks. And then just that little glint of the little droplets on the eyelashes and that, because they would have been maybe 15, maybe 20 foot from us. And it's got a head full of all those memories. I have 3 nieces. I have a whole bunch of folks that said, you really need to write this down. And I need to write it down for other reasons. It would be great to get it all down as a sort of referencing, but I found it healing. I found it cathartic, and as I said, especially with the sort of with a couple of medical issues which I've had. And the other thing is on the medical issues that I have is if you ever visit Egypt, don't go in summer, don't get dehydrated, because that's bad news. That's what happened to me.
Andy,
and,
have you actually written a book, or did you mentioned that some of your writings went into Shabaya Moyo 1 and 2?
Yeah, a couple, about a dozen or so pieces have found their way into there. I suppose I'm in the end of the beginning stage, or the beginning of the end stage, whichever you look at it. I've drafted a whole bunch of pieces. I have over 56 of them, and it's just to put them together. The thing is, it's one of these things. The one piece which I needed to do was just a short piece, just to launch it and say, okay. And I've called that piece "A Seed is Planted," and it's the bridging of my dad's experiences with my own, and then that sort of alloying of that, and then having this ground within me prepared, and then having, I suppose, seed sown, and then this whole forest that's actually grown since then.
Oh, you must.
So yeah, as I sit here now, I'm lucky enough to have, in my opinion, a really superb editor who's heard all this stuff so flipping often, and it's just for please, yes, I've heard all that before. But she's a superb editor, and if I use 3 adjectives, she'll say, sorry, you don't need 3 adjectives for large or purple or blue, smelly or something. So just trick out those 2, go with that one.
You must get them.
And that published. Was so once that's done, I'll have a publisher's manuscript. And then it's okay. What are we going to do with it? We'll see. But that's it. I have to draw a line in the sand and say that's it. It's no more, because anything that comes after that, hey, who knows? Volume 2.
Well, if you ever need any help in publishing it, just let me know. I've published 3 books.
I will speak to you very, very soon, Ross.
Andy,
I do need help and I need advice.
Yeah, no problem. I found interactions with wild animals to be some of the funniest things that I experienced. Have you got a few anecdotes of what happened, particularly our African soldiers and the way they responded to some of the threats facing them was absolutely hilarious. Do you have two, three like that?
Yeah, I would say at least 60% of the stories. Well, I'd say. I'm not sure if there's a story that I've written that doesn't lean very heavily on some aspect of nature. Yeah. I wrote 2 pieces about a certain resort and casino in Kariba, but that's livestock of a different sort, because I was like the Mother Teresa type. I seem to be blown, molded out of this high density virtue, and whereas the rest of the fellows went off and partook of these hellish iniquities and had their money fleeced from them, is I would actually elect myself as bursar, and I would balance the cash float and dole out, okay, right, well, okay, now time for another round of drinks. That comes out the pool. And then, you've won $12. Right. Give me 8. And then I had all these pockets stuffed with these things. And I would arrange the personal finances of up to 5 or 6 people who otherwise would have been spark out in the gutter and penniless the next day. So that's the only a couple of pieces that are about that sort of side. The rest of them are anecdotes. All of them are facts. I've tried to go for as few embellishments as possible. But I don't know, you could say, and then it rained, which sounds pretty lame.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. But I mean, you don't want to be sort of loading that particular concept with about 30 adjectives. So somewhere in between there is that golden balance. But yeah, basically, as I said, I call these things almost cautionary tales of the outdoors, based on our experiences. Some of them, again, for good or ill, I don't know, but some of them make me laugh. I've read some pieces to a couple of other folks to see to them as well. So,
could you give us some specific examples, 2 or 3 specific examples of things with animals, maybe?
The one, there's so many enough. I suppose probably one of the really amazing things was my very first bush trip when I got to Indep. Was we were sent from Kariba to Chirundu, and then that night at Chirundu, some hard words were spoken between some fellows who were deploying the first morning and some fellows who just come back from a 6-week deployment and were drinking beer and making a huge amount of noise. So to cut a very long story short, is that we didn't deploy at first light, and we were brought together under the red-eyed gaze of one of the sort of really languid lieutenants who was also sort of passing out. And told now we didn't need this kind of uproar in cutting through the social fabric of Chirundu forward base. So off you go. And hey, before I don't know what it's like when you're on an RL and you look along the road. You've been driving for hours and you see a sign that says Sipolido 279 kilometers. Like what? Where? Or whatever, I can't remember what the place is, but it's like some obscure place. I've never even heard of it, and that was that distance. So we did this incredible walk-in. Got to the area. There's no delicate way of putting this. One of the guys in my call sign was cleaning his weapon. It's a syntax error, and I'm sure several people have done this before. But with a semi-automatic rifle, there's this thing called a rifle, which has a magazine. It has. So what you need to do is, first thing, very important, take the flipping magazine off. Take that off, put it to one side. Then point it in a safe direction. Work the bolt. Now, if that thing had chambered around, the round is now on the ground. So you let the pumps go, pick the thing, put that round back, and then if you want to put that magazine back on, that weapon has been made safe. Fine. What you do not do is pull your bolt back, and then take your weapon off, and then put your change lever on repeat or fire. Then thank God, point this in a safe direction and pull the trigger, because there's this echoing bang followed by this funny, this tinkling of a cartridge on the pebbled ground. And if you happen to be in the middle of God knows where, you've been compromised. So this fellow unfortunately did exactly that. So we were supposed to be in sort of relatively deep cover, and no army call signs had been near that area for a while. So it's quite important that we actually snuck in and sort of pulled back and did some sort of clandestine sniveling and looking around. But unfortunately, one fellow in the best of intentions, like I said, wasn't me, but he had an accidental discharge. So what actually happened is then it was just like, what are we going to do? We're going to phone, get on the radio and say, excuse me, sorry, but we've just had an accidental discharge. So, whatever we were going to tell base, the truth was not an option. So we just thought we'd ring it. But what we wound up doing was actually then finding this most amazing place. And the Cautionary River itself was dry, except for about a 6 feet wide ribbon of water that just snaked its way through the watercourse. And in those days, there was a rock bar at the end of literally where the Cautionary River almost met the Zambezi, and a little plunge of maybe 10 foot down in this final sort of like this delta, this wedge-shaped delta. It would have been maybe 200 yards wide over there, tapering, and maybe 200 yards long. but there was this amazing pool under a fig tree. And this water would run from the Chaury River into about, I suppose, 4 foot of this rocky luxury. So we'd sit there in the shade with this amazing view. And I remember looking down from this view in the shade with this beautiful clear water just trickling by, and just seeing 2 of the largest crocodiles I think I'd ever seen in my life that were on the sandbank below us. And that was surreal, because in crocodiles, we every time that we went near the river, if there was a crocodile that wasn't on a sandbank, if it was in the water, they would all just go, there you are, and they would simply make you the focus. And that's why, so one of the stories which I've written is a thing called the crocodile magnets. And if there's ever any particular thing, is you're never ever alone in that area. If you're literally by the river, you'll have crocodiles as company. Everywhere else, you have a myriad of flies and biting creatures. So just on the sort of the natural side is, I suppose, the biggest disconnect was to sit in this wonderful water in perfect safety, and then look down on the biggest crocodiles which I've ever seen, and then to just speculate. Well, okay, now what size do you think that one was? Because it's very difficult to estimate sizes of crocodiles. And then to go back then at the end of 6 weeks of that kind of stuff, meant to be woken up at 3 minutes past midnight, then at 20 minutes to 1, and then literally at 15 to 20 minute intervals all the way through the small hours by honey badgers trying to break into the kitchen in the Fort base at Chilundu. And they are no respecters of people's properties. If you try and lock things in tin trucks, if you're trying to store things in wooden lockers and sort of thing, they quite simply, they will demolish anything like that. I think there's a door that they can't open. It's just, I don't know what it is about them, but they're incredibly strong. They're also they're very ingenious with respect to that. And then you just get one of these old sort of lamps or whatever, and then go out there and you can see all these beady eyes, these dreadful creatures. These things are sitting up in the kitchen. And you did not want to stand in their way, because if they decided to actually go somewhere, you were well advised to get the hell out of wherever it was they were going.
Absolutely.
And then hippo, all sorts of things. Having a hippo blunder through where you put out an instant light grenade and a claymore mine in a couple of places. I was reduced to a 3-man call sign once, so we thought we put some sort of base security in. And then black, midnight, hearing this stealthy crunching sound and thinking, geez, it could be something. It could be 6 or 7 people walking or something, sort of through the grass, and then seeing just in the gloom this shape that looked about the size of a VW Beetle, and then to look down and you're about to blow your claymore mine, but the two bits of wire that you've actually exposed, that you're touching the terminals of the batteries. You're holding them like that, the next thing it's snatched out of your hand by something that's walked, or just like pull them out. And I tell you what, look, that's when my hair started falling out. I think most of the follicles in my body turned inside out, then and then alone. That was one of the creepiest things.
I remember I was in an ambush position on a very, very moonlit night one night, and the moon was big and orange, sort of low at the horizon. And I heard this rustling in the grass behind us, and we were obviously ambushing the riverfront. And the hippos don't like being separated from the water when they suspect humans. So this thing came charging through us. It must have had a hell of a fright when it sensed us. It came charging through us and landed in the water with a massive shower of spray. But the thing that will remain indelibly imprinted in my mind is I was ambushing with some African guys, and this guy had stood up, and his face, his hair, the poise of his mouth open, almost a bit of horror in the eyes, silhouetted against the moon, is something that's just buried itself into my mind. So funny, all these things. And then the natural bomb shelling, and the panic, and then you have to very quietly recite your ambush position.
I need to send you a piece in that case, because there's one there's a piece which would be similar experiences, but it was the one and only time. I was still fresh from School of Infantry then, and I should have known better, and I should have listened to my guys. because there were quite Nostradamus-like predictions of what would happen. And then full moon rising, and we decided, I decided that we were going to do a night patrol in one of the most heavily populated Amazon areas on the planet. And we got to, the weirdest thing is my uncanny ability to get lost was instantly brought in. And I think the weirdest thing is if you figure you want to stay about 1 kilometer from the river, and there's hippos that are snorting and puffing and all the way there, all you've got to do is just sort of like stick to that. But we wound up on the verge of a swamp, which I don't think is marked on that particular map. So Lord knows where we were. Then we then heard this sort of crunching sound in this adrenaline grass, which is one of the sort of panic. I did look up the Latin name for the so-called sawgrass or adrenaline grass, but it's a grass. It's a raggrass with a saw-edged leaf margin, which is much sought after by all sorts of members of the so-called Big Five. I've had a friend of mine put to flight by a leopard in that. We've encountered buffalo in that on numerous occurrences, hippo, plenty plus. But on this particular night, nothing. We just heard the snorting and then the sound of crunching, and then the wind swung, and we got this very heavy scent of cattle. So, like an idiot, we happened to be standing on sort of like a pebbly bank at that time, and with these very these thin lightweight boots, and if you feel what you're standing on, picked up a sort of goose egg style stone, and I gave it to Ngwenya, who's one of my gents who had a rocket-like throwing arms. He hands me his FN, and he unwinds, and this stone goes whirring off into the ether. About a second and a half later, there's this whack, and then there was a strangled snort, and then the ground just started shaking. And what he'd done was okay, like he bumped this pebble, but he hit this buffalo on the horn, and the buffalo thought, and the buffalo just took off in the direction in which the majority of them were facing, and that had to be us.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know. I meant to ask you when your guys bombshelled, there was this incredible. There were numerous techniques, and like with high jump, there's various techniques. There's the Fosbury flop at the older time, and there's this, and running away from dangerous game also. But there was, and you would have known this because and I think ergonomically, it's one of the most efficient ways of putting a maximum distance between source of disturbance and then source of alarm. And I'm sorry, but the closest distance between 2 points isn't a straight line. The closest distance between 2 points is 0. And in this case, so this thing, the stone hit this thing, and they just took off, and they took off in the direction in which we were standing. But Ngwenya told me, because he and I took off together, and I know where the other two guys, because this was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we eventually got together. Because a whole bunch of things were revealed in the plan is we hadn't designated any crashed rendezvous along the way, saying, okay, if we get rousted, we'll meet at that tree then. I had no idea where we were. As far as I'm concerned, I wasn't sure if we were still in Africa. We were that lost. But Ngwenya told me that when both of he and I ran together for at least, I think, 15 or 20 yards, and I was slightly in the lead, and he tells me that I looked across at him as we were running, and I handed him back his FN, and I said, here, you'll need this. And then I veered off one way and he veered off the other. But he was making incredible progress with this traditional swastika position, which is, I don't know, did you notice how your fellows actually covered ground? So this so-called swastika position was seen by various fellows, and I had this amazing mental image in the moonlight of seeing, the glint of full moon on a sort of blue rifle barrel, and then on, like a as these guys shot off. But it was one of these, now you see them, now you don't.
Yeah,
we were 4. We were close enough to be in sort of like the hand-rigging thing. Then there was this fateful missile that was lobbed. It hit the horn, and then all hell broke loose, to use the cliche, and these guys was bombshelled. What was, I don't know, it's a military disaster. It could have been worse. I have a feeling I probably surpassed that on one other occasion, which I will tell you about, but because, I think that the majority of adrenaline, as I said, if you look at the percent, how do I put it? Okay, so if you've got 100 units of adrenaline that's expended, I would say 98 units would be expended on fleeing very large, frankly terrifying creatures. And there's a hell of a thing of when you're sitting in a car and a lion comes up and sort of like starts gunning a wheel or something, because you're still removed from that. But when that same lion comes up, or a hyena or something like that, and I mean, you wake up at night and you just see, I mean, you see these shapes above you, and there's elephants that have actually walked through where four of you are lying, but they do it so quietly, and there was never any aggro. You know, if I look at elephants, I was looking at that of all the courteous creatures that we had there. I suppose elephants would have been probably about the most courteous. Now onto I suppose discourteous. Well, how about this? Again, I have this rare ability to get lost, and I'm not proud of that, but that's the way it is. Is I will point in random directions. It's not that I'm 180 degrees out wherever I go. I am varying degrees of out wherever I go. And it's just one of those seriously unfortunate things. I'm really lucky we had a bloody great river on the one side. And you know, like if you stopped breathing because it was wet, then you knew you were in the river. And if you're looking out, that was north. So behind you was south. So, yep. And the river flowed from left to right. So that was east. And, sorry, that was west and that was east. So I've done it again. But we deployed on one, there were 3 call signs going in. And there's a guy who I will call Fred, who was an interesting character. He'd been at School of Infantry with us. He'd one of the guys who also had been passed out as a corporal. Now, my dad was an instrument technician, and he knew a couple of guys in the pattern making shop, and they said, "Oh, Andrew's he's in the army. Let me make him a mini flare projector," which is great. You know, it's 21 or 22 millimeter signal flares, and you get the white ones, you get the green ones, and the red ones. What could go wrong? Except on this day, at this beautiful knurled brass, you know, with a very tied, very ostentatiously, with a piece of parachute cord in the center pouch of my chest webbing, and in there, there's a 20-round magazine, a heliograph mirror, a butane gas cylinder, 2 mini flares on the slip, you know, like all packed together on the string. Fred grabs this thing out the pocket. I'll have a look at that. He said, "Oh, look, let me just undo it. And we've just deployed. We are off the vehicles. We've got our stuff on, and we're just about to hit the so-called Chimoy Trail, which is about 28 k's of very, very shaly, rough ground with lots of rhinos in those days to get to a sort of a section of Kariba Gorge, you know, the Zambezi River Gorge, where we were going to do an observation post. And now this guy, so he's got this thing of mine, and he's just sort of staring at this thing, and he's pulling the striker back just to the first little baton, and then letting it go. Click, click. So it's hitting the rim, but it hasn't been pulled right the way down, and you know, so it hasn't got the sort of, oh geez, what would it be, 30 mils of fly to actually hit this rimfire cartridge and send this thing off. But it's just this little pull it back, click, 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 and I'm trying to get it from him, but they say, look, it's getting dark. It started to drizzle. Thank God it started to drizzle. And this guy just won't give me this thing back. And just give it to me, you know. So I'm going, all right. And it's like very offended. So he starts like stuffing it back in my webbing. And I'm looking down, I'm seeing this, you know, actually seeing, you know, the striker itself, that little stud, pull all the way back and then let go, bang. And then this thing is catching on the fabric, on the canvas of my chest webbing. It's been pulled most of the way back, and it said, whoa, it set it off, and then bang, one red flare into my chest webbing. Sets off the gas lighter. No. Yeah. I am reliably informed that I never raised my voice. But I mean, the guys are laughing so much. My machine gunner Bando was. I thought he was going to need the Heimlich maneuver, because and every time he'd start talking about this, he'd start laughing again, and they would all just laugh and laugh and laugh. And I've got my chest webbing is in 2 pieces. So for one of these, you know, there's got 2 pouches there. This thing is just like, it's just carbon. It's burnt all the way through. And my shirt has got like there's no shirt there, and I didn't get burnt because what I apparently did was I threw my weapon on the ground, just took this thing away, and then tried to get my head as far back as possible. And I can't have done this. I probably would have dislocated my neck or something. But I distinctly remember, probably incorrectly, that I touched with my nose in between my own shoulder blades my face away from this conflagration, because night blindness, I got this great big glowing red strontium powered bloody football of flaming gas right under my nose. And then it occurs that guy up and down and sideways. afterwards, but he was just like completely indignant. What? We were like, what did I do? I didn't. Anyway, so that was a wonderful beginning of that. So it wasn't only the four-legged Ramazans that we had to watch all the time. Some of them went on 2 legs.
Those were the vagaries of war. Andy, I think we've met the end of our time that we can allocate to this. I just want to say it's been an absolute honor to talk to you. Really, really interesting, very funny. And I'm pretty sure that one of the other boys might want to interview some more with some more specific stories. They were wonderful. Thank you.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. It's been my honor. Thank you so much for your interest in this. And so I'm sure Russell and Andy will get hold of this. And I'll say, well, I love both of them. They're most amazing characters. And I just wish them all the best. I wish all of the guys out there nothing but the best.
Indeed.
May they be heart's ease the rest of their days.
Thank you, brother. And in closing, I forgot to ask you what Chibaya Moyo means. Why you found it so interesting.
Well, again, the title to me was wonderful and subtle. It's a killing thrust to the heart, as it were, the literal and figurative thing. Oh. And what I found so interesting about that is I get to read a lot. I'm supposed to be I read as a profession because I'm forever doing desktop studies and all that kind of shit. So I get articles, scientific articles, and otherwise things to read. But then I'm supposed to. You wouldn't think so from the disorganization of my thought processes. But I'm supposed to try and make sense and try and simplify a couple of these things. What I very seldom do is read anything other than legal documents or highly technical documents cover to cover and look at every single point. But I read that book from the first letter of the title to I think the last ISBN number on the back cover of both books. I have read every syllable of both books, and I cannot think of another book that I've actually done that with. Actually, I can. Only one. And by a master author called Cormac McCarthy. And he wrote this harrowing novel of, I suppose, 1870s, 1840s, thereabouts, in sort of southern USA called Blood Meridian. And it's a seriously harrowing read. So, I mean, I found all sorts of things in Chibaya Moyo. It was, in a way, I suppose, I'm not going to get touchy-feely here, but it is a part of this. There was a very, very stark cutoff for us in the military. Because literally one day we were there, the next second we were gone. And I saw it in the guys' faces. They're regular soldiers. I just climbed on the vehicle and it was off you go, cheers. And what was ridiculous about that is that I had 2 more call-ups after that because I went to 6R, which is Bulawayo. As a living in Kwekwe and going to Bulawayo, go figure. But anyway, that was the logic. So I should have gone to 10th Battalion, but went to 6RR. And that was a completely different experience. It was nothing I'd seen before. But it's just on that particular thing is what I just wanted it so badly for so many years was just to have something as opposed to just this bleakness, this sense of helplessness, and the sense of just having just gone, just vanished. Because my God, I should have made the effort, and I wish I had made the effort to stay in touch with at least the guys with whom I served, but I never did that. So in this Chibaya Moyo it's probably too little, too late. But I just hope and pray that I suppose I don't know. It sounds tacky. It sounds like an Oprahism, but to keep people alive in your memory, I think is quite something. And to share those memories with other people, that is quite something else. So, and it's a privilege. It's a responsibility. It takes a life of its own.
So what does the actual word Chibaya Moyo mean? If you could be quick and specific on that one.
My take on that is it's idiom, and it's that one telling. It's a decisive. I think literally Chibaya Moyo is strike to the heart. Yeah. So it's a lethal blow, usually with a stabbing spear. But that's the literal thing. The figurative side, it is. I think if you have perfectly put a point. If someone's been talking around an issue or something, you come in and you summarize it in a couple of short, sharp sentences. Chibaya Moyo, in other words, straight to the heart of the matter. Excellent. That's what I took from that.
Excellent. And thank you very much, Andy. Excellent talk. We'll leave it at that. And
pleasure, Barbara. Thank you. Thank you. I hope we get together at some stage and crush some of that Scottish laughing water, or whatever it is.
Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? No, thank you very much. And I hope the sound quality comes out on this talk. We've had to talk through my cell phone, but that's up to the boffins to sort out. So, Andy, thank you very much, and all the best for your life going forward.
Absolute pleasure. We'll be in touch, my friend.